Now, one political commentator says South Africans are facing the bleakest Christmas and New Year since apartheid. Dr. Ebrahim Harvey penned an article in which he lambastes the ANC-led government as the country prepares for next year's general elections. Dr. Harvey joins us now live. Dr. Harvey, thank you so much for joining us. Now, those who are cautiously optimistic usually say that if we continue on this trajectory, that the wheels will come off. Now, you say in your article the wheels have already fallen off.
Yes, thanks for this. You've been breaking up a bit. I don't know what the problem is. I'm sitting in Cape Town, but you've been breaking up a bit. But I heard the gist of your question. I think really this is a dire moment. You know, we are at the end of important national elections from 1994. Certainly the most difficult one that the ANC will be participating in. We've seen a mushrooming of opposition parties, etc. And the biggest challenges that the ANC faces will be in this election. We also cannot deny there is a very gloomy and despondent mood in this country. And though in the past week or two we've seen some relief with the load shedding, South Africa is going through the worst socio-economic and political crisis since 1994. And it is what motivated me to pen that column. But primarily the whole thrust of the piece is to point out that next year is unlike any previous election the ANC has participated in and won. It has never lost, remember that. It lost Gauteng in 2016, 2021 local government elections, but the ANC has never lost a national election. In 2019, it got 57% of the vote. Many things have changed for the worse since 2019. And as a result of it, I insist that I think the ANC is so gloomy and bad at the moment that they're likely to drop to 40 to 45% of the vote. But there are many factors, and I think that it's very important. You see, as much as you don't want to be unduly pessimistic, you must not also project a false optimism. Any optimistic forecast of next year, both the elections prior to that and subsequent, it has to be rooted in what is the conditions at the moment. And it's very dire. I mean, really, we've never been. This is the biggest crisis, I argue, that South Africa has ever been in. From the time the Union of South Africa was formed in 1910. It's the biggest crisis. And so making
next year's general elections so much more important. And just staying with the ruling party, the ANC itself seems, lost in itself, unable to navigate its failures. It's been talking about self-correcting for many, many years now. In your view, how has this played out in what we have witnessed being the biggest impact on citizens and how the country is seeing these results?
No, society's been struggling to respond to the issues. There's been a very big decline of civil society. And if you can do research, the ANC has played a big part in the decline of civil society from the 1990s already. I don't have time to go into that now. But, what is very clear, and you can see the recent whole resignation, of what is happening at the moment, really, I think is the crisis is coming to a head. It's coming to a head in a way just a few months before the 2024 elections. But the mood is one of widespread despondency. I can tell you, gloom, wherever you go, there is a great deal of despondency, and it's possible, I hope it doesn't happen, that you have a very big stay away from the polls next year. That is how gloomy and despondent people are, including voters and the electorate. So we have to see how it's going to pan out. Sorry, I had earlier referred to Mavuso Msimang's resignation. Forgot his name for the moment. And though he's returned to the fold of the ANC, there's no doubt that he was subjected to a lot of pressure, I believe, from the MK Veterans League and others, to reconsider his decision, because they thought, and I think wrongly, that if he had resigned, it would have a significant impact on the outcome of the elections. I initially thought so. I don't think so anymore. But nevertheless, it showed you how deep the crisis is in the ANC. And the former president saying that he's throwing in his lot with this new party, which I don't know, seems to be a figment of his imagination that has been registered 3-4 months ago. And we have to see how it's going to turn out. But I think that, more than Mavuso Msimang's resignation, might count significantly against the ANC, in particular in KZN, where Zuma still has a formidable and loyal following, despite all the allegations of corruption. So, this MK party, we have to see what's going to come in the new year, because, we don't even know who the leading figures are, what the project is, what is the mission. There's nothing, tangible at all, except what Zuma has said about this party, that he is called on the electorate, which is why I said it could cause massive confusion amongst the ANC supporters and the electorate, that we should be voting for this new outfit, MK party, and not for the ANC. And in that respect, definitely decampaigning the ANC, as the General Secretary accused him and many people of over the past few weeks.
And Dr. Harvey, as you mentioned, this new Umkhonto weSizwe party, you also talk about a mushrooming of political parties that we're seeing enter the fore. We already entered local government coalitions in 2016. That hasn't gone too well for many of the metros. Now, if we then go and implement that on a provincial and national level, should that be the solution to what you have dubbed, a crisis under the ANC?
No, well, you must be careful not to draw an analogy. You see, local government is the hotbed, seedbed of, you can see the combustible service delivery issues, the huge, very different, however. If a national coalition government is constituted, which I believe it will be, ANC will still be the majority party, even if it drops to 40-45%, the DA and the EFF. You're going to have a national coalition government that is not likely to replicate the crisis that you've seen in local government, because it's a whole different set of issues, I don't foresee as many difficulties and problems at national level than what you've had at local level. And local level is a very combustible level of lots of seething issues around service delivery, very combustible. I think analysts who think that therefore you're going to have a replication of this at national level if a national coalition government is constituted is mistaken. You might have, it's going to be a bumpy ride because it's the first time you're going to have a national coalition government constructed after a national election. But it certainly, to my mind, is not going to be as tumultuous and combustible as local governments have been, particularly as we've seen in Tshwane and in Joburg.
It also seems as though that South Africans are having to deal with crisis after crisis, while those with money are able to at least buy their way out of poor service delivery. When we talk about the middle class and the working class, they are becoming further indebted and unable to access basic services like water and sanitation, healthcare, and even quality education. Do you think that the ANC is able to win back the faith of the working and middle class at any point?
No. I'll tell you something. It's very likely that it might, concerning those two key constituencies, it might even be worse with the results of 2024. And I'm happy you've drawn attention to, people think it's just been an electricity and load shedding crisis. It's in a crisis. That's why I go into the food crisis, and we hardly talk about it. Malnutrition, food, water, sanitation, sewage, everything. We have the biggest infrastructural crisis, I believe, in the entire history of South Africa, right down to 1910 when the Union of South Africa was formed. It's never been so bad, Water, sanitation, Eskom, everything seems to be collapsing, And I don't think that even the bit of relief we have certainly had. And it does give a glimmer of hope, with the load shedding crisis, having significantly improved the past week. No doubt, however, despite that, we're really in the worst crisis, and there's nobody in the ruling party, and they know it. The infrastructural crisis that they're largely responsible for. I don't know if you heard the former spokesman of Eskom 2 weeks ago, when this question was raised about who's primarily responsible for the electricity crisis. He said the ANC, more than any other factor. And I mean, this is the former spokesman of Eskom who said this, you know. He holds the ANC responsible for the electricity crisis, which, you know, has had massive ramifications for the economy, small, right across society, you know. People have suffered severely from this loading shedding crisis. But as I said, a glimmer of hope. It seems to be receding a bit. We've got to see what the new year holds in store.
And that former Eskom spokesperson, Sikonati Manjanja, also talking about corruption. Now,
yes.
Let's focus on that corruption and mismanagement. There seems
yes.
to be a push to have the NHI signed into law, and that has already threatened healthcare practitioners to leave the country. Now, the biggest concern is, of course, corruption and how the funds may be and probably will be siphoned. Can you even blame these critics? I mean, there are countless examples of corruption and mismanagement we can draw from just the healthcare sector alone.
No, it's a very important question you've raised, which is why I partly go into that matter in the column, you know. And you must draw a distinction, it's very important analytically, draw a distinction between the massive corruption and incompetence and maladministration and mismanagement that has gone on in the public, in the health sector, particularly public hospitals, and the question of competency and lack of skills, very, very serious, has existed. It's primarily why I think, besides corruption, the impact and mismanagement, the public hospitals are in the worst condition they've ever been in, arguably ever, I say again. And you know what is very significant? You'll see a lot of times I'm saying not just post-apartheid South Africa. The crisis is the worst, I believe, in many respects in the entire history. Well, if you talk of 1910 when the Union of South Africa was formed, you know, until now. So that's a very important distinction to draw, that, you know, it's not just, I believe this is electioneering. Let me tell you, look at the timing. Look at the timing of this in NHI bill and legislation. 5 months. You think it's not calculated to woo disgruntled voters to vote for the ANC? It's absolutely, to my mind, calculated to have an impact on people's voting sentiments in the 2024 elections, because it doesn't stand there right. I mean, they might have, you know, their own reasons about being skeptical about and you know, there's a whole threat, and people have already resigned from hospitals and the public, you know, the health sector because of this, the impact of this legislation. That aside from that, you know, there are huge issues that you cannot introduce an NHI when hospitals are virtually falling apart. You have to think carefully, do you have the resources, the manpower, the skills and the competency to implement what is going to be a complicated system? It's not going to be a straightforward, easy system, the NHI. Now, how can you expect hospitals and the health department to be driving it when the hospitals in particular is in the worst crisis ever? Both of a combination of a lack of leadership, incompetence and massive resources, because the public sector and the hospitals have been pillaged also. Monies have been stolen there also. And it's taken a great toll, I think, on the whole, very undesirable set of circumstances to introduce and certainly to impose an NHI. I think it's political electioneering, really. I don't think the NHI is going to take off and have this resounding success that the ANC is promising it's going to have. In fact, I think it's likely if it sees the light of day, if it sees the light of the day, it might likely worsen the crisis. Because I can tell you now, the public hospitals are in no position whatsoever, I believe, most of them, except Grooteske in Cape Town. The best run public hospital is in Cape Town, where the DA is in power. Otherwise, public sector hospitals, which is going to have to drive the NHI, is in an abysmal, unprecedented mess as we speak right now.
That was political commentator Dr. Ebrahim Harvey. Dr. Ebrahim, thank you so much for joining us